Well, hello. So today we're going to look at classes. We're going to dive a bit further into object-oriented programming and look at a basic idea called classes. So the aim is we'll talk about the motivation behind them. Classes and objects; those two things go together. We'll hear more about objects next week, but they're kind of very essentially linked. Those two things. We'll look at an example of Home Hub with just one class. And then we'll have some multiple classes, so lots of different classes, and then towards the end, we'll look at the hasAttribute function, hasAttra function, which enables us to look at a class and decide what it's able to do. And finally, we'll do another example with the pizza example. Okay, so so far in this module, we've seen a couple of ways to group information together. We've done that with tuples, where we can group two or more values. And we've done that with dictionaries, where we can group key-valued pairs of information. So you can use keys to look up values. And whilst those are both really valuable data structures, they're actually quite limited. You wouldn't be able to program very general kind of applications using just these things, or you can, but it's not ideal. So a much more general way of grouping information is the idea of a class and its objects. Okay, so this is the whole couple of lectures, including this one and the next one, is all about grouping things together so that they make sense coherently. And we talk about the idea of classes and objects. So the class is the design that's telling us what the things are and what they can do. So thinking about the Home Hub, the class would be, you might have a class for your lights, you might have a class for the heating, you might have a class for the music player. And the objects are the things created by that design. So that's the actual thing that gets used in the code. That's clearer to understand when we actually do some examples. But if you think about real life, if you were building a car or a mobile phone or a kettle in a factory, you'd need a design plan, a class, which would then tell you how to produce them, and then you could make lots of cars or lots of phones or kettles. Going back to the software, our objects usually contain data. Okay, so we've grouped data together before in tuples, but we can have lots of different types of data in our objects. And they usually have functions, which we often call methods. So a function that's inside a class is usually called a method. So the class defines what data and what methods are available, and then the objects are able to use those things. And classes they're really based on real life, so modeling things in real life inside our software. So, for example, we're going to look at the Home Hub as a good motivational example. So before we get into any code, let's think about what the Home Hub does. So each device can have its own class, so which is going to store data about that device. So for example, if we're talking about a light, what does a light need to know? It needs to know whether it's on or off. It needs to know what the brightness is set to, if it's dimmable, but it might not be. And we'll see examples where we can have both options, where we can have a dimmable light and maybe something that's a bit more specific with, a bit less specific, with a bit more general, just a light that's either on or off. And then we can have methods or functions to process that data. So for the light class, you would just have a method that switches the light on or off. So the light records whether it's on or off. It knows whether it's on or off, but then we have a method that will change that value. Or we might have a method to increase or decrease the brightness. Okay, so just to remind you though, we are only building a simulation of the control system for this Home Hub. We're not actually building the devices. Okay, so in real life, I've said this before about the Home Hub, but in real life, if we were doing this for a real system, we'd need some voice recognition software, which would, turn the user's commands into text, or something that the control system could understand. We'd need the actual physical devices, the lights or the heating or whatever, connected maybe by Wi-Fi or maybe by Bluetooth. And we'd need a means for those devices to actually turn themselves on and off. So it's not we're not doing the real thing, but it gives you a good representation of how the core system in one of these kind of home hubs might work. So some sort of control loop just sits there waiting for the user to give commands, and when it's got a command, it figures out what that command means and it sends it to the device. Okay, I'm going to stop this video here, and then we'll actually look at the code and try and understand how it works.